Hi, Laura Henshaw.
Hi.
Thank you so much for coming on Inherited. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very good. And this feels like a little bit of a full circle moment because your two wonderful leaders in Mission Zara interviewed me on Shameless. It's still one of my favourite interviews I've ever done in my life. And that would have been it was back when they first started. So maybe how many years has it been now?
I think about nearly
More.
heading on 6.
Six years ago.
6 years next year. Yeah.
So it's I was actually reflecting this morning as I was running on where I was at in my life at that stage, versus today. And I'm so excited to explore that with you. So now I'm very well.
Oh, isn't that interesting, even looking back 5 years and how much you can grow and all your just life changes in that time. So were you in your mid-20s then when you did that interview?
Yes, I would have been in my mid-20s, and it was also very much at the beginning of Mission Zara's journey with Shameless.
Yeah.
And we recorded, I remember, in my house in the kitchen. And no, it was so nice. But yeah, it was back, so mid-20s, and would have been similar for them as well.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Laura. We're all really, really excited to hear about all the things you've inherited and how they've shaped who you are. We'll start with your recipe today. What is your recipe?
So my recipe it was so funny because I love cooking, and I was thinking about these. I love the 4 R's, by the way. They're fantastic. It really made me think. And when I was thinking about, what recipe has made, it's not the most delicious recipe that I love right now, but what recipe has made kind of the most impact on me when I think of memories, and the thing that came to my mind straight away was a pancake recipe in the Donna Hay recipe book. And I remember the book so clearly. It had a light blue cover with white writing with the Donna Hay, and there was a pancake recipe in there. And I remember the page now when I think back to it, it had milk on it, flour. So you could tell, you knew exactly what kind of recipe we used in that book every Sunday. And it was a really special memory from my childhood. We'd make pancakes every Sunday. We'd put lemon and sugar on them.
Yeah.
Or I think sometimes banana, but mainly lemon and sugar. And yeah, that was a really, really special memory that made up a lot of my childhood.
Yeah, what was your childhood like?
Oh, great. This is always such a hard question because it's where do I start? I was very lucky. I grew up in a family. We always had enough. I loved playing sport. That was a huge part of my childhood. I think one part of my childhood, though, that was very, I suppose, formative in who I am today in my life was my parents' relationship and their divorce when I was 12 years old. So I think that was why I went to that pancake recipe that's what I thought to send through, because of that was one part. And I had a wonderful childhood, but my parents they didn't have a great relationship. And so what that meant was for probably between the age of around 6 and 12 before they divorced, I know they stayed together for us, and I know, and it's so hard because when you're that young, all you want is for your parents and your family to stay together because that's all you see at school. And I think now the divorce rate is so high. I think it's 50% or more. Back then, I didn't have any friends in my primary school, that maybe 1 or 2 people that I knew of, but in my friendship group, everyone had, I suppose in quotation marks, a perfect family, like a mum and dad. When I was at their house, I never saw them fighting. Again, of course, that's only the small insight I saw into their lives. But as a child, I think that's what you think is everything, and that's there kind of always. And I kind of would always think, why do my parents argue? Why is that what's happening for me versus my friends? And so for that reason, I think I just really wanted my parents to stay together.
Yeah.
And even though for them, and I know that's what they were doing, they were staying together as long as they could to kind of keep the family together. But when they did separate, it was when I was 12, so that was when I was going into year 7. That was so much better for them. And I think it just took all of the worry away. For me, and it's really interesting. It's actually formed a lot of my behaviour as an adult, and some of it I've had to unlearn. And a big part of that was within my childhood with my parents, because I'm the oldest, so I'm the oldest of 3. I've got 2 younger sisters, Sienna and Lucy. Sienna's 3 years younger, Lucy is 6 years younger. And so I felt like I was responsible, and this was my mum or dad did not put this on me. I put this on myself, but I almost felt like I was responsible for keeping them together. So I knew the things that would cause them to argue, and so I would almost try and intercept. Yeah. And it's actually meant that I'm now super conflict avoidant because I suppose I spent like quite a few years, really formative years, trying to just be like, oh, if I say this, then they'll stop, or if I intercept here, then they won't argue, or I know that triggers, mum or dad or whatever it might be, so we'll make sure we don't bring that up.
Yeah.
And then having friends over and worrying like, oh, will they argue in front of my friends? And all just that worry that I think I know my parents would have held that as well. And so for them, when I was 12 to finally be able to separate was fantastic for both of them. But it's interesting in our family when I think back now, I actually didn't tell any of my friends for was at least 2 years. I just didn't tell them. I remember my friends would come over and I would say, oh, my dad's traveling for work. And I used to just make up all of this stuff. Like my parents actually didn't sleep in the same room for quite a long time. And where my dad slept was very similar or very close to my bedroom. And so I would always worry about, oh, if I have friends sleep over, like this isn't normal and I'm embarrassed if they're going to see. And so I just felt like I just had to like almost not live a double life, but I could never be fully honest with any of my friends about, or I'm sure I could have, but I just felt like, when you're young, you think all of that stuff matters and impacts like your worth and who you are, which it obviously doesn't. Yes. It doesn't at all.
Well, exactly. You sort of think like, what's wrong with me and my family? This isn't normal, even though it actually is really common. Yeah. And it's hard to go through that when you are so little and in your formative years. Why do you think you held that responsibility to want to intercept and also, I guess, keep the peace in a way?
I wonder if it's an oldest child syndrome type thing maybe. Yeah. I think it's because I was, and I don't know if it was innate in me or if it was something that I built up in myself and I learned, but I just wanted to create peace in every single environment and I felt responsible for that. Maybe because my sisters were younger, they weren't as aware maybe of what was going on, especially my younger sister who was between 0 and 3 during the time. So she was like a baby.
Yeah.
That's probably what it is, but it's really interesting in how it's then kind of gone into my adulthood because obviously, as I spoke about, like avoidance of conflict has been something that I've had to work through, like especially in my role at KIC. Avoiding conflict and hard conversations is not an option when you run a business. So I've had to unlearn all that behaviour. But I think the other thing is when it comes to financial responsibility, like one of the biggest arguments that my parents had, and this would not be uncommon, like I know it's one of the biggest reasons for divorce within Australia, but probably globally as well, is financial stress. And so I felt a lot of responsibility to make sure that didn't happen to me because of what that kind of caused. And that's now kind of, it's interesting. It's penetrated into a lot of my relationships and just this responsibility I feel more generally, which I'm now trying to kind of undo a little bit of that because it's a lot to hold if you feel responsible for every single person around you, and it also disempowers them as well.
Totally. Was there a moment when you did speak about it when you were a teenager or even in your early 20s because I know you sort of kept this in for a long time. Do you sort of remember when you told any other friends or people in your life?
So it was when, and this is why it's so important. I mean, with divorce, obviously it's not shameful in any way whatsoever. No. It's very normalised, but it's why it's so important to talk about things. And for me, it was when I had friends in my high school who had come from separated families. And so I didn't feel shameful in telling them because that was their life. And I remember I think it was in year 8, I had a friend, her name was Kate, and she'd come from a separated family and she just owned it. She was like, I love going to mum's house. Like she spoke about going to her mum's house and then and how she loved it and that it was funny. A lot of my friends with divorced parents would play their parents off against each other.
Yeah. No, it's common, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. You get maybe you get more presents and all of these things, but which are all very surface layer things. But I think I saw someone who wasn't embarrassed or shameful of going through that experience. And just owned it, and it was completely normal. And I was like, okay, well, if you're not letting this impact you, and for me, because when you're not honest, you kind of live in fear the whole time. You're worried oh, will someone find out? Will mum talk to someone? Or will someone come over and realise my dad's stuff isn't there? And, there's all these things that when you're not living true to yourself and you feel like you have to hide and not that that was who I was, because obviously I'm separate from my parents' divorce, but it is a big part of you as your childhood, right?
Definitely.
Your family. And so I think for me, it was this amazing feeling of like, I can let this go. Like, I don't have to be shameful about this anymore. Like, it's okay. Yeah. And it just felt, and it was seeing like having a role model of someone else who just owned it and it made no difference to them. And I was like, well, why am I letting this eat me up inside? Like, it's okay to talk about it.
Yeah, definitely. And that's hard to come to terms with when you're younger. Like that must have spanned probably over like your 20s as well, and like figuring it out and understanding it, and then getting to know your parents as friends as well, like a different figure in your life. That relationship changes over your 20s. What is your relationship with them like now? And do you talk about sort of the divorce or their relationship when you were younger?
Oh, good question. So with my mum, I do a bit more. I have a great relationship with both of my parents. My mum has been a very formative part of my life. I think one of the things I'm so grateful for is when they did separate, Mum was working part-time, and this has been why I'm so passionate about speaking about financial independence and just why it's so important. So Mum was working part-time, and just because of the state of my dad's business and the finances, there wasn't a lot of money to be able to support raising us. Yeah. And so Mum, of course, was like, I need to find a full-time job straight away, which she was able to do. But she sacrificed so much too. So my sisters and I went to a Catholic school. And that was, while it's not like the most private school you can go to, I know like the stress and how hard my mum had to work to send us to that school, which was such a privilege to be able to go to, because for her, us getting an education to then be able to get a job and kind of have financial independence and not be like, I have had on my fridge, well, not my fridge now, but Mum's fridge, like a sticker that said, or what's it called when you stick a fridge magnet?
Yeah.
And it says like, a man is not a financial plan. Like I have.
A man is not a financial plan. I really love that. Yeah.
But for Mum, I think for her, because it's one of the things, like if you don't have financial independence, it's very hard to, and this wasn't my mum's situation, but I just know from so many people, women, and speaking to them, you can't leave. You can leave, but it's very hard to leave a relationship if you don't have that financial independence, right? And so growing up, that was so important for Mum to kind of, I suppose, give us the education and then hope for us to go on to university or whatever it might be that she didn't do. And it's been interesting as well, like even around thinking about having children, Mum kind of was very much like, you need to establish your career first. It's funny now. She's changed so much. She's like, when are you having a baby? Yeah. I'm like, Mum, I'm not ready yet, okay?
You hit your early 30s exactly. And the questions start coming out. Yeah, exactly. they're ready for it now all of a sudden.
Exactly. But she's been very much like, I've just grown up in this environment where it's like, go to school, go to uni, get a really good job, establish yourself in your career and how important that is. And I think for me, honestly, probably 17 years old, I was so headstrong in that I will have financial independence. I don't know how I'm going to make it work, but I knew that was very, very important to me, and I was going to work as hard as I could until I had that. And I think I'm very grateful for that, because I think that contributed to being where I am today. Like that work ethic's been really helpful. It is something that it's very hard to switch off though, and that's something that I kind of grapple with now. But I know 100% that if I hadn't have gone through that, I would not be where I am today, because I just knew that I am the only person responsible for myself, and I have to put the work in, and I have to create the outcomes, and opportunities won't come to me. Like I have to create them. And that mindset that I think sometimes when it's on in your head 24/7 can be exhausting, but it's also served me, I think, really well. And I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah, you've inherited that from her and, sort of experienced your parents' relationship breakdown, and that's taught you about your own life and what you need to put first as well, like yourself. What did you learn about love as a child?
I mean, the relationship that I had with my parents and my sisters had with my parents, like that was love. But I think, and it's really interesting you ask that, because what goes straight to my mind, I remember when Mum and Dad separated. Mum, it was such a funny, it's not funny, it wasn't funny at the time. But now I can laugh. Yes. My poor mum. She drove us to go to a psychologist, and because she kind of said, I want you to be able to make sure that you can. I don't want you to think that like this relationship that has been role modeled to you is normal. Like you need to find a partner that, you know, supports you and you work together, and that's important, and there's love in that, and et cetera, et cetera. And I just remember we didn't go in. My sisters and I, the three of us, were in the back of the car. First we cried, and I was probably at this stage like 13 or 14, so it wasn't a baby.
It's a lot to take in though still at that age. Yeah. I don't want to go in, Mum.
It was so funny. I was like, Mum, I understand. I was such a smart, like I just thought I knew everything at that age. I think as I thought like I could control the outcome of my parents' marriage. Like I thought I knew everything. And I was like, no, Mum, we are very aware. Like we know what we need to find in a partner if that's what we even want to find, and blah, blah, blah. And I remember I think we ended up going in maybe like after 40 minutes. But I was like, I don't need this psychologist, Mum. I am good. Like I know. I'm not going to let this happen to me.
Yeah.
She must have been like, oh my God. And then because my little sisters were like there, and I was saying that, and I'm the oldest, from my memory, they were like, yeah, we're not going in. We don't want to. We don't need this, blah, blah, blah. So my poor mum.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of a relationship with like love, in terms of a romantic relationship, I probably didn't have that role modeled. I mean, my parents did probably have a better relationship before I was 6, but I can't remember a lot of that. So I think for me, I probably, apart from the relationship I had with my parents, which was love, it's hard to though imagine that in a romantic sense though. So it's a really good question. I think I just knew what I didn't want when it came to love. I think that is probably the best way to kind of explain it.
Did it change your relationships growing up as a teenager, like any romantic relationships, or even before you met your partner Dalton now?
It's really interesting. I think I was very comforted by, like, my ex-partner before Dalton. I've kind of only been in 2 long-term relationships, and the second one I got married to.
Yeah.
So with my partner before Dalton, he had a really beautiful family. They were very, very family orientated, really supportive, had a beautiful kind of marriage between his parents. And I think that to me was quite formative. It was like really, because we were together for around 4 or 5 years. So that was really, I think for me, I'm very grateful for that time. Like obviously the relationship with that person, but also what they taught me about family and their relationship together and the support and everything, because I suppose I hadn't had that role model to me. So I'm very grateful for that. And I think I spent a lot of time with his family, and I think it's because I just loved that family connection that they had. I think outside of that, it's really interesting. So I am usually quite an anxious person and overthinking. The one part of my life that I have never, ever overthought and I've never had any worries about is within romantic relationships. And it's so interesting. It might be because I haven't had I haven't been in a long-term relationship and had a breakup where someone broke up with me, and maybe that's helpful. I don't know what it is, but it's the one thing in my life where I am so because I've struggled with my confidence and my worthiness, but within my romantic relationships, I say to Dalton all the time, like, you are so lucky to have me. Like, I am such a good wife.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky, and I'm lucky to have him as well, right? Of
course, yeah.
But it's so interesting. It's the one area that, and maybe it's because I grew up knowing that I can, if I were to do it, and by myself I could. Yeah. Like, love is so special, but I also think we are so lucky, and not in all countries, but in Australia in most instances to live in 2024. Like in 1950, as women, we couldn't have a bank account. So like we needed a husband, right? If we wanted to work and all of those things. Now we don't. Yeah. And I think that there's obviously a lot of privilege in me saying that, in that I have financial independence and all of those things that I can support myself. But I just think it's like, so if I choose a partner, it's because they add value to my life, not because I need them. And I think that's something that in my marriage now I'm very grateful to have, is that we are both so independent, and that's really important to me.
Reflecting on your recent podcast series that you put out on KIC, Do I Want Kids? You got Dalton on as well in the final episode, and together you were talking about your want and desire to have children. I listened and absolutely adored it. And I think so many people related to your story and also just your thought process around it all, because you've hit you're 31, aren't you?
Yes, I'm about to turn 32 actually. So when this comes out, I will be 32.
Yeah, you'll be 32. Yeah. There you go. So yeah, I feel like right now I'm seeing a lot of pregnancies and babies. We're just at that stage in our life, and I feel like it almost puts you into a bit of a tizzy. You think, well, should I be doing that? And that's really what you explored around your thoughts. Where did you guys land at the end there? Do you want kids? If so, like when? Yeah, how are you feeling?
I mean, great question. And it's true. I feel like it was like I blinked. And so before I blinked, I had maybe one or two friends that had babies, but they were the friends that wanted to have children really early. And that was, what they wanted to do. But for everyone else, it was like, oh, no, we're not ready. Like, we still feel like kids. Like, we're not ready to have kids. We've got so much more to do and all of those things. And then I blinked, and then all of a sudden, like, I'm one of the only people that haven't had a baby or are pregnant in my kind of friendship circles. And that's really confronting. And that was kind of why I did the mini-series. And in terms of where Dalton and I got to, and it was really interesting in the mini-series. In the first episode, I spoke to this conversation had so much impact on me, to a woman called Anne Davidman. She's a parenthood clarity mentor, which is quite a niche title.
Yeah, it is.
Very important.
Yeah.
Anyway, and she spoke a lot about when she does her parenthood clarity mentoring, she does it separately with the two partners. And I think I had grown up believing, and I think this would be most people, that it's something that you decide if you want or if you don't together if you are in a relationship, and because obviously you can also do it by yourself. Yeah. Again, why it's amazing to be a woman in 2024.
Yeah.
Anyway, but that to me was, but she said when she does her work, she works with each person separately, because you have to come to your desire and what you desire inside around having children or not, because it is almost if you have a different desire, it's like it can be a values misalignment. It's one of the biggest decisions in our lives that we make that you cannot undo. And it does, in a lot of ways, alter our life. And, for some people, that's an incredible experience. For other people, it's not as incredible. And that was really interesting to me. And then when I spoke to a relationship expert, her name's Megan Luscombe, and she's had over 12 years experience. And through that time, every single time, one person has wanted children and one hasn't. And they've come in for counselling or support. Yeah. Coming back from that is really hard because of just that misalignment, and there's resentment and, all of these things. And that was a really big eye-opener for me. And it was interesting in the podcast because Dalton and I hadn't really spoken about because I wanted that episode to be kind of raw as possible. We both went into it, I think, thinking that we both wanted children. I do think if either one of us had changed completely, we would have spoken about it, obviously, before we went to a microphone.
Yes.
But it was just really eye-opening in learning that actually we both need to want this separately before we come together and make that decision. And I mean, we both hadn't changed our minds throughout the period, and we had both decided that we did have the desire to have children. But in terms of when, it's really, you know what, it's really hard because I'm kind of like, oh, will it be 12 months or 24 months? I don't know. I found out, when was it? Maybe 6 months ago that I had, and this is how I'm shocking with my life admin / I can be quite avoidant with things. So Well,
you're a really busy woman, so
Yeah, but you can always find time, if you want to. And I was diagnosed with PCOS, which I'd never known that I had. I just have shocking period pain. I have regular periods, but I have to be fully medicated the entire time.
Yeah.
Which I was like, this probably isn't normal to be taking this much Nurofen and Panadol every single month. So I went and had an internal ultrasound, and so I have PCOS. They're looking into if I have endo. I've had the specialist recommendation at home for 6 months. Haven't done anything with it. I need to do something with that. And I think for me, it'll be kind of going down that journey and understanding my body a little bit better. Dalton and I, we're kind of in between. We want to almost wait as long as we can, but I don't want to wait and then not be able to have children because I waited too long, which I think for so many women and people, that's just such a common thought process that we have and thing that we kind of work through. But I definitely don't feel ready right now.
Hi listeners, it's Ruby here. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Inherited. After a hectic year, I'd love a low-key summer. I, in fact, cannot wait. So far, it's looking like long lunches with friends, balmy dinner parties, and plenty of cheese boards. If you're an entertainer or even just a snacker like me, you'll probably love finding fun new things for your pantry or plate. Today, I'm bringing you one from our sponsor, Cobram Estate. Their extra virgin olive oil is kind of a must for summer cooking and hosting. Cobram Estate extra virgin olive oil is the simplest way to elevate your summer dishes because it's made from 100% first cold pressed olives picked and pressed on the Cobram Estate groves in northwest Victoria. It's that oil you pop into a bowl next to torn up bread, some cheese and juicy olives for the ultimate charcuterie board with zero effort, which is just what we need for a lazy summer. A huge thank you to Cobram Estate for supporting this episode of Inherited. What do you think was sort of holding you both back a little bit? I know you're both very career-oriented and driven people, so you both are running your own businesses separately. Do you think that was it, or was there other things as well that were sort of make you feel a bit uncertain?
I think there's a few things. So that is definitely, that was probably number one. I feel like we're both in this season of our life where I just have so much more from a career perspective. And I don't want to, it's really interesting because we've had and we did an episode on the podcast, you can continue to drive in your career and have children. You absolutely can. Is it harder because you have to keep a human alive and, work out childcare and all of those things? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Then not having to do that. But is it possible? Yes. Absolutely it is. It's really interesting. I feel like a lot of the women that have had very successful careers that we see, we don't often hear about their children very much. So I feel like there's not a lot of role modelling around being super career driven and also having children. So that's hard because I hadn't really seen it because I think people just don't talk about it very much. I think we do. There's a lot of people who speak about maybe deciding after they have children to be a stay-at-home parent and, they make a lot of content about that online, but we don't see the latter probably because, their role isn't a content creator. They're working in other things. And so I think that for me was something that was difficult, and I just feel like I always feel like I'm on a running track and I feel like I'm gliding, which is a very special thing to feel, and I don't want to stop. And that was probably one thing, and similar for Dalton. And then the second thing I think was the fear of, it's kind of two-pronged. One is the fear of losing my identity because I would love to be a mother, but I am, and not that being a mother isn't enough. That's incredible. It's amazing. It's obviously so difficult to do. But there's more to me than that. And I was really scared of losing myself and my drive. I think that's one of my biggest fears is, as I said, because working hard has been something that has been such a big part of my identity. I feared that, what if I don't want to work hard anymore? And I'm why do I think that, et cetera, and unpacking all of that. But if I don't work hard, what am I good at? What will I do? What will my life be like? And all these questions that I didn't need answers to because what will be, right? But I think I'm quite type A personality, to control outcomes, and you kind of can't when it comes to children and the impact that they make on your life. But they also make the most. I've also now had so many conversations. It's been interesting. A lot of people since I did the mini-series that have had incredible careers have reached out to me and said, and a lot of them are my friends, hey, I've never spoken to you about this because I just make it work, but here's how I made it work. And I haven't lost any drive and I'm still so motivated, and my kids actually make me more present, with the time with them, which means I can be better at work and I'm more productive because I have to be, and all of those things. So it's kind of been exploring that. And then also I think we're in this stage of social media, and it's amazing that people are very honest online. It's really amazing. And I think as well with infertility, and I know I loved the episode you did with Tara
Jordan.
Yes, on her
such
journey.
A beautiful story.
Amazing.
Yeah, and just such an optimistic,
Oh my goodness, she's incredible. But she's been through so much hardship to be pregnant, right? And for a lot of people, that's the hardest thing with pregnancy. Some people can fall pregnant in one try, and also when we were younger, when someone was 18 and they accidentally fell pregnant. And I remember my health teacher said to me that she knew someone that fell pregnant using a condom and on the pill. So that's kind of what we grew up and think, right? But now we know so much more about infertility. And so I think there's also people are very conscious of not being I love being a parent, it's so amazing, et cetera, because they don't want to for people that can't like make it harder for them. So maybe that's why, but I feel like the online sentiment can be sometimes quite negative about how hard parenting is. And if you've never done it before, it's very hard to look at that and think like, oh, I want to do that.
Yeah.
So I think as well, but it's just been really, like for me, it's coming back to the fact that my experience will be so just as how I live my life is different to everyone around me, because we are all different. We all have different desires and ways that we do things, and our value systems are all different. The way I parent won't be like the person that I see online. It won't be like that's not going to be my story, because my story is my own story. But it can be so hard not to get caught up in thinking that, that because that happened to them, that will be my experience, but it won't.
Exactly. Does it sort of ever make you resent being a woman?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. Like in some ways, 100%. Like there's part of me that I'm like, I don't want to, people that have twins, I know it is so difficult to have twins, because it's just everything is so much harder. And because I haven't had a child, I feel, please, people that have twins listening, I know you're going to be yelling at me through your phone. But part of me is like, I wish I could just have twins. And it's hard. I don't want to think about pregnancy like an interruption.
No.
Because it's like it's its own amazing experience, and I don't want to rush through anything, but maybe it's because I haven't done it, but I do. And that's why, I mean, with Dalton, like while we both have the desire to have children, he's been I'm very grateful for this, like very open with me about the fact that he probably would like to have children earlier than I do. But he's like, my body, I don't have to get pregnant. Like, I don't have to go through what you go through. So it's really up to you, because guys, I know they have to stop to like support, but they don't need to go through, 9 months of pregnancy and then the after period of that with breastfeeding, etc. So it's one of those things I wish you could, because I'm so like, we should share every responsibility. I do find it hard that we can't share
this.
Pregnancy.
Yeah, we can't. They can be there to support us, but really it's the mother and that baby for a long time. And you've seen it as well with your beautiful co-founder and business partner, Steph Claire Smith, who's just announced that she's pregnant as well. And your two female co-founders leading a business, Yeah,
and we had the conversation. I think that's something that it's interesting in reading like the comments around that. I think unless you run a business, it's very hard to understand why on earth you would like plan a pregnancy with someone else, because pregnancy is such a beautiful, exciting, like personal decision that you make, right?
Yeah.
And it feels very unromantic to have a like business planning conversation around when you want to get pregnant. And this is something that, I speak to Mission Zara about all the time. It's very hard I feel like, to understand unless you run a business, because otherwise it just doesn't really make sense why you do that. And it does feel a bit, not contractual per se, but just really unsexy.
Yeah.
But it's what we had to do, because for us with KIC, both of us being pregnant at the same time isn't ideal in terms of just the business and planning and the way we run the team. And so we had that conversation. I was really grateful to Steph. Like Steph had Harvey. He is three, but I think when she has her second baby, actually I think they're going to be born around the same time in the same month, which is amazing. But they'll be 4 years apart. And so I knew, like Steph had been really open to me around the gap that she had wanted. And I knew that it was getting kind of to the time where that gap was getting maybe a little bit bigger than she had hoped. And however, Steph was really like so great in that she wanted me to do the mini series and kind of work out what I wanted to do. And she said to me, like, I've had a baby, like I've taken the time out of the business. I want you to know that you can do that next if you want to, which I was very grateful for. And so she kind of gave me the space to do the mini-series, and then we had a conversation, and obviously I decided that I didn't want to have children now. And so that's when we kind of said, like, well, that's something that I would like, and to have another child. And so we planned around that, which is, again, it's the conversations. It's so funny and this is why I always speak to Mission Sarah about the conversations you have to have are just, they're hard and they're confrontational, and they're just things that you just maybe when you first started out you didn't think you'd ever have to have with someone, but when you're running a business you do.
And it's two women too.
Yes,
and
exactly.
I think that could sometimes make you resent being, in this position of female co-founder that's running a business, but you have such incredible relationships with your partner, your business partners and your romantic partners. There's a lot that you have to go in and consider before you make these decisions, but I'm excited for you regardless,
Thank
for the
you.
future. We'll get to your rule next. And your rule is something that's associated with your self-worth and your body. What is it?
So my rule is to never associate my worth with the size of my body and to never weigh myself. Of course, outside of like if I'm at a doctor or something, I just get them to do it. I don't look at it. And that is really, really, really important to me because of the journey that I went on kind of from around 19 to my early 20s with my body.
Yeah. When do you think your relationship with your body was at its worst?
It's probably at its worst when I was how old was I? Between 19 and 20, I was in Milan. I'd been offered, I'd finished school. I was doing my law and my business degree at uni and I was modelling on the side. It paid way. I was also a ward clerk at a hospital. I was waitressing, but the modelling one modelling job paid more than I would get paid in like a month of waitressing. So I was like, well, this is very efficient. I can study more. But with modelling, like within Australia, you have to be super just realistic about there's not a lot of work here. I mean, there's some people that work full time, but
yes,
you have to have like the most appealing look for the market to get to work full time here. Which, like, for example, when Steph was modelling, she worked full time.
Yeah.
And back then it was like the diversity was nowhere near where it is now. It was so bad. It was like, I feel like it was very much like most of the people booked in Australia were like blonde beach look. And then sometimes they'd choose someone like a brunette. Yeah. And I was probably like the 10th most popular or maybe lower in Melbourne. And so I would get a job when like all the other ones were booked or sick or, away or whatever.
Yeah, right.
So for me, modelling was kind of always, I never ever thought it was going to be my end point or like a big part of my career. It was just like a means it was made good money when I was doing it.
Yeah.
And so I got offered an opportunity to go and model in Milan. And I think as like a 20-year-old or whatever I was, to be asked like, oh my God, someone wants me to go and model overseas in Italy. Like I'd never been there. Like, wow, that's amazing. Like how glamorous must it be? Yeah. So I deferred university to go and do that for 6 months. And it was so funny because I thought it was going to be the most glamorous, amazing thing. And then I got there and the industry there is much bigger, but there are honestly 100 times more models there.
Yeah.
So I'd go to a casting and so in Australia, if you have a casting, and a casting for anyone that doesn't know, because I had no idea before I started, is like if they're trying to book someone for their campaign photo shoot.
Yeah.
In Australia, they usually will go on the website, look at people, be like, I want to meet these 5 people. They get you to try on the clothes, etc. You have a time that you go. In Milan, when you went to a casting for like 1 half-day lookbook and there is 300 people there. It was crazy. And when I got
looking
there,
at your body, yeah.
Yeah, looking at your
body. And judging your appearance.
Exactly right. Not what you say, like judging your appearance and the way that you look. And when I got there, and it is the state of the industry over there that it's so much less inclusive in terms of like body size, and the size that most of the samples were like a 4 to 6. And I got there and I remember I went into my agency and they were like, you must be like inflamed from the plane. And like, we won't do your photos now, like we'll do them later, blah, blah. And I was like inflamed. Like I had deprived myself so much. My kind of bad relationship with food and exercise had already started, but this like really exacerbated it because I was already the smallest I'd ever been. And then to be like, well, hang on, it's not small enough. I then had to, like, I remember I didn't have enough money to do like it was when juice cleansers were just starting. I'm like, how do I lose weight in a week? Like, what am I going to do? And I went to the shop and and again, like, I don't even know if Uber was around then, but I didn't have money for a taxi or anything. So I bought like the cheapest juicer I could find, only vegetables, no fruit, because I was worried about that. Like, that's how intense I was being. And I push this stupid trolley with all this stuff in it 2 kilometres home on all the road to cobblestone there, pulled it up the stairs in my model apartment that I was in to like the 3rd floor and made all the juices. And it was just like, I like look back at that and I feel so sad for that person, like just that I went to that. But because I knew I was there, I had to be as small as possible. And I remember when I finished that, I weighed myself and I had this goal weight that I was like, when I get to this weight, I will be happy. Then everything will be fine. I'll feel whatever, all of the things. I'll feel worthy. I'll feel good enough. And I remember I got to this weight, this goal weight, and I looked in the mirror and all I could see was things that were wrong with my body. And in the moment, with hindsight, I can look back on that and think like honestly, I just want to go and hug myself at that stage in that I thought that would bring me joy. But it's also like that's the world we live in. Like the diet culture industry globally is worth billions of dollars, and it preys on women essentially. Like obviously it also targets men, but predominantly women, in making us feel like if we lose the last 5, we'll be happy. If we transform our body and, go on a calorie deficit and basically deprive ourselves and excessively exercise for an 8-week challenge period, then we'll be happy. And we're just sold that message like every single day. And so, of course, that's why I thought that I would have all this joy and everything if I got to this goal weight. But I felt empty. I felt not good enough. And I think when you put so much pressure on one moment, especially if it's around the way your body looks, which actually means nothing, how empty and alone you feel when that moment doesn't bring you everything that you thought it would. That's really hard. And so from that point, I came back to Australia. I was able to rebuild my relationship with, food and exercise. And that was when Steph also went through a really similar journey, and that's what we connected on. And that was why we started KIC, because we wanted to create a place where people could, because when you live a healthy lifestyle, when you move your body, you eat well, look after your mind, you feel so good, right? And it's a privilege to understand how to do that. So many people grow up and through school they might have a shocking the beep test, for example, is such a formative experience of our childhood with exercise. Yeah. And for a lot of people it's hell and it's embarrassing and it's shameful and you never want to do it again. And so for so many people, that formative relationship with the beep test means that they don't do sport again. Then they get to 30, they don't know how to move their bodies. And so I know it's a privilege to be able to know how to move my body and to know what I enjoy and to know how to eat well. And so we wanted to create a place where we could have all of those tools, but without all of the toxic diet culture, language around it, we don't do before and after photos, no measurements, so many apps you go in and they're like, oh, it's about how you feel. But then it's what's your arm measurement and what's your goal and what are the target areas you want to work off? And that it's so problematic because then you might not have thought you had an insecurity, but then all of a sudden it's oh, maybe I do want to lose weight from my arms or target my tummy, whatever that might be.
It puts the focus on it. And then it puts that idea in your head, really.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You also mentioned before as well that you are a bit of an overthinker as well. You can have that busy mind and inner dialogue. I know you shared earlier, or maybe a couple of months ago on your social media about the worst panic attack that you'd had this year. What happened when you had that panic attack?
Oh, yes. So that was a couple of months ago now. We'd actually just come back. Jolt and I I'd been on a fitness retreat before, but not a health retreat. And we'd just come back from a health retreat. I have never, ever finished it's so funny. I called it a holiday. Everyone's like, Laura, a health retreat's not a holiday. But for me, it was beautiful. A beautiful holiday.
Well, it sounds so relaxing. I'd be like, this is a holiday.
Exactly.
You're booking off leave.
Yeah, exactly.
You're getting off your emails.
Exactly. And because of the nature of the retreat, you weren't allowed to have, you can have your phone on you at all times.
Yeah.
But there was only internet. There was no 4G, 5G or whatever. There was only Wi-Fi because it was just in the middle of the bushland. There was Wi-Fi just in one tiny area. And you had to consciously go there. It wasn't a place that you kind of went to. It was a 5-minute walk from where we ate. It was a 10-minute walk from where we were sleeping. Yeah. So you had to be really conscious about that. And that was the first time, I think, since we started KIC, I would say, so in 10 years, that I have taken, and I still again, I did not have to do this, but I still was in the habit of checking my emails every day for the first 5 days, but then I stopped. And I wasn't on my phone for hours. I was just checking if everything was okay, and then I got off it in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And it was the first time I have done that in 10 years. And
wow, that really just stopped.
Yeah, it was amazing. I just felt so connected to myself, connected. It was really special. Dalton did it with me and connected to each other, for our marriage and our relationship. And I was coming back and on the plane, I was like, wow, I've never felt so relaxed coming back from a holiday, like so ready to go back into work, just feeling like I felt completely recharged. Even on the last day, like I often find on the last day of a holiday, sometimes I can get a bit anxious, like, oh shit, I've got so much work to catch up on. Like, should I have taken this time off, even though I'd been working most of the time anyway, etc. But I didn't feel that. And I think that's why I was so shocked by it. So I got on the plane and I started to feel like really, really hot. It's like, and I also had this, my muscles felt like I had done, like it's like I had done a 5-hour workout and used muscles that I'd never, like the worst DOMS, which for anyone that doesn't know what that means, is just muscle pain I've ever had in my entire life. It's like, this is so weird. Like I didn't do any, like what did I do yesterday? Like that made me feel this way. And I actually was meant to have a dress fitting and I had to message. I felt so I kind of left it as long as I could until I messaged to say it was with Steph and my wedding designer, Kaya, who designed my wedding dress. And I had to message them and say, I'm so sorry, I can't come. I think I'm getting really sick. Like I just actually recovered the week before from a cold or a flu, whatever. And I was like, fuck, how am I getting sick again? But I was like to them, I do not want to give this to you. Like I've got a hectic fever. I feel so sick. Got in the car. It was an hour Uber drive home from the airport. And I got out of and in the car, I'm like, there's something, I do not know what's wrong with me, but I'm in so much pain. I feel just shocking. And we got out of the Uber and I was like to Dalton, I can hardly walk. It was so weird. And he was like, what do you mean? Like, you're fine. Come on, like come inside. We got to the front. We have a porch and I sat down on the porch and Dalton was like, can you get up? Like, why don't you coming inside? Like, why are you sitting? It was raining. Like, why are you sitting outside in the rain? And I was like, I can't get up. And I just burst into tears. I couldn't open my eyes. I couldn't speak. Like when I was speaking, I felt like my face was like on a slant. It's like almost like when someone has a stroke. Like I couldn't, my words they felt like slurred when they were coming out. And I felt like I couldn't breathe, like I was having a heart attack. And my whole body just, because of the pain was just getting worse and worse. And Dolt brought me inside. I've had a few before, so he kind of knew what to do, and he's had them as well, so which is very helpful. So he carried me inside, laid me down on the couch, and then just because when you're having a panic attack, you think you're gonna die, and then I feel like that exacerbates it and makes it worse. And so he was like, I think you're having a panic attack. Like, it's okay. Like, you're going to be okay, et cetera, et cetera. And then I feel like what always helps me, like about 20 minutes in, because I hadn't stopped the hysterical crying and shaking. And usually that only lasts about 5 to 10 minutes, but it went on for about, I was over half an hour. But then he said to me, okay, if you actually think you're having a heart attack, I'm gonna call the ambulance. And that helped me so much because I was like, I don't want to go to the hospital.
Yeah.
I'm fine.
We're not calling
an ambulance. So then I was
ambulance.
like, I'm fine. And that helped actually quite a bit, which was, I think he did on purpose. But then it ended up, so it started at 4:30. I then went straight into our bed and just lied there I was in so much pain until I had a tiny bit of dinner, but I felt really sick. But I had to have like my eyes closed, it had to be dark while I was eating. And I went to bed and my heart rate was at like 120 or something until past 10 p.m. So it went on for a really long time, and I still don't know. I think it was a part of my body being like, you've just had like this break, and now you're going back into kind of what you did before,
the busyness of your life.
Exactly.
Yeah. Or it's like even slowing down and stopping sometimes. Like I know when I've been on holidays, because I'm quite I have a very busy mind. I'm an anxious thinker. I can be a bit obsessive with my thoughts. When I actually stop, I can't handle it. It's like a productivity feeling. Do you think your body probably may not have relaxed in that way in such a long time that it almost had a bit of a blip?
Yeah, I think so. And I think as well it might have been my body saying to me like and I think when your body physically, because you can be like, oh, I'm stressed or I'm busy, whatever. Yeah. But when your body gives you signs, I feel like that's when, for me, like it was a very big wake-up call, and I've made changes to kind of help. It's fine. I'm trying to think if I've actually continued to implement any of them now, but it's funny, like you're so conscious for the first month or two and then you just forget, right? Yes. Life goes on. But when your body physically sends you signs like that, I just feel like it's so important to try and listen to them. So I see, like, while it was horrible and like I don't wish them upon anyone, I am grateful for it in a lot of ways.
I want to chat about your relic necks.
Yes.
And This is your New York Marathon medal. And to you, you told us that it represents putting myself first. Everything went wrong the night before. You had an allergic reaction, but you still did it. And talking about trusting yourself just earlier, this was a big lesson in just trusting yourself. Why the New York Mara, first of all?
Oh, I feel like for me, I was very lucky to be able to do it with New Balance, and I'd never done a marathon before. And I think the main reason for that is just because I was like, I can't do the training. Like when I say, again, this is coming back to what we spoke about before in terms of thinking what I should or shouldn't be doing or what I can or I can't do when I could have done it. And so the New York Marathon, I think for me, it was this, I'd never been to New York before. I've always dreamt of going there. Like it was the most incredible, it was amazing. It was so cool. But having that goal booked in, I knew in 2023, I had a really hard year with putting myself first. And I think, I mean, Mish and I walk quite a bit. And I feel like there was a stage there, I feel horrible, but for like, and this happens in friendships, right? But for 4 months, I feel like I was the most depressing person to go for a walk with, poor Mish.
Friendships go through that sometimes. You're lifting someone up
Exactly.
and then, yeah.
Exactly. But I wasn't doing that great mentally, and I was putting a lot of pressure on myself and a lot of things going on. And at that time that whole year, I'd almost the whole year I was injured. Sometimes from falling over because I'm clumsy, but then also like I had a bulged disc in my back and all of these things. And so what you need to do when you're injured is, for me, it was going to the physio and doing my rehab to get better. But every single week, and my poor physio, Alana, like I think it was almost like 4 or 5 weeks, no more, probably 10. I was booked in for appointments for 12 weeks. I probably went to 2 of them because the day would come and there would be a meeting that needed to when I say needed, it could have gone at another time, but I was like, oh, I have to fit this in. I could not prioritize myself. It was like everything else would get on top of it. And it comes back to that, like I felt so responsible for everything else that I was like, I can't, I have to go last because how am I going to fit in everything else? And so when I said yes to the marathon, you can't, I mean, I have seen some people, mainly guys on Instagram, like raw dogging marathons with no training. That is so, do not advise doing that. Exactly.
That's
it's
intense.
so far. It is so, so far to move your body. Like the strain that you put your body through if you haven't trained, how long, and then they're like injured for, months or so, months after. So do not recommend doing that. And I knew that if I was going to do it, I was going to train properly because I couldn't do it if I didn't. Yeah. And so in saying yes to it, to me, it represented like putting myself first. And that was with some of my training sessions were 3 hours. And to me, like in 2023, if you had have said oh, you're going to be training maybe over the week 6 hours a week doing your marathon training, I would have been like, well, I can't. I can't fit that in. But it was this representation of no, I'm worthy of this time for myself, which felt really, really special. And then I think, so you mentioned the allergic reaction the night before, which was at 10 p.m. I accidentally drank cashew something. I'm allergic to cashews. And I was very, very sick. And I didn't think that I was going to be able to do it. At 2 a.m. in the morning, I was still so sick. We had to wake up at 4 a.m. for the marathon. So I was like, how am I going to get better? And this time I woke up with a couple of hours sleep, and by some miracle I felt absolutely fine. And to me, what that taught me, I did the marathon, I got through it. It was the first 28K, I was like, this is amazing, I should do more. And then anyone that's done one, for me, it was from 29K. It was like, oh my God, why does anyone do this? They're crazy. This is so hard.
Yeah.
But I finished it. And if you had have asked me, anyone had have asked me 6 months ago when New Balance asked me, do you want to do the New York Marathon, but you're not going to be able to have the preparation that you want. You are not going to have any sleep the night before. Your body's going to be under huge strain because you will have had allergic reaction. I would have said no way. I can't do it. I can't believe, the fact that I'm even going to try and do it in the first place is hard, let alone if my prep isn't perfect. And I think for me, and that wasn't the case, and I still did it. And so it's a lesson for me as someone that can be a bit of a control freak and really put so much pressure on myself to prepare, which when you have a lot on, you actually can't always prepare as much as you would like. It's just not possible, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, it was this lesson that it wasn't perfect, and I still did it because I trusted myself. And that's something that I am, again, while it was horrible in the night, I'm actually so grateful that happened, because I don't think I would have realized how much I can trust myself and let go.
That must have been, I remember seeing your video on TikTok, you talking about it as well, such a scary time for you mentally to go, maybe I'm not going to do this. You know, I've come here, I've been training for X amount of time. This might not actually happen, but to still go and do it. I feel like this experience would sit in the back of your mind and you could always go back and revisit this and actually say, well, I can prove to myself I can do hard things.
Yeah.
I can do hard things. That's something that I sometimes keep in my mind when I'm feeling hard to trust myself or putting that pressure on. Because to run the New York Marathon the night after you've had no sleep and you've had an allergic reaction, that is really, really hard. So that must have been such a special moment for you. Do you think this relic, your marathon medal, holds probably one of the most proudest moments you've had in your life so far?
Yeah, I think so. And it's funny when I was thinking about my relic, because it's like it's very hard to think that a tangible object can represent so much, right? But that's what it represents to me, and I think it's just a reminder of, and we're reminded of this all the time, but like I've got it now. It's actually much heavier than I thought it would. It was so funny the day after everyone wears their medal around, and I did for a bit, and then I was like, this is actually too heavy. It's hurting, banging on my tummy.
Yeah.
It's so special, but it's just this tangible thing that represents to me how capable we are when we do not even realize. Like there are so many things that you and I will both do, and everyone listening in our lives, that we never, ever, ever thought that we could, and we will. And we sit here now and you might, like anyone listening might think, oh, imagine I could do this, imagine I could do this. You can. And I think we just do not realize how much we can do. And that to me, it's like just this amazing reminder of that. So I'm going to hang it up so I can see it all the time in like, you can do hard things. We're capable of so much more than we ever realize.
We are. And we don't sort of see, other people see it. We sometimes don't see it in ourselves. Like we are our own worst critics. Also, I do want to ask a couple of last questions. You, Laura Henshaw, away from social media and business and, you know, running the New York Marathon as well this year, like who is Laura Henshaw, you know, the one that we don't always see, I suppose, or hear from?
Who am I? Oh, my goodness. I think if I strip all of that back, like I do think work is a big part of my identity, and I find that very hard to think about like who I am if I've stripped that out, because it is a big part of who I am. Oh, goodness, how would I even – I think I'm someone who – it's interesting, like people might look at like my job or my life and think like, oh, you've got there because, you know, you're really smart, or not you're special, but I think so often we look at people that have achieved things and think like, oh, but they're special, like that can't be me. Like I am not special. Like absolutely there have been parts of my story, like there are in everyone's, where there's luck that's come in. That's enabled me to get to where I am now. But I'm not special. Like I'm just it's so funny. I always laugh when I say I'm just a girl. I just think of a movie.
The song as well, no doubt.
Exactly.
Yeah, that trending one on TikTok,
exactly.
It always pops up.
Exactly. But honestly, like trying my best every day, like for me, I feel my happiest when I help other people and make them feel good within themselves. And I think for me, it's like I'm just someone who's trying to do that every single day, does not always get it right. I am on a journey with leadership within, like I'm absolutely not perfect. I do not have all the answers, but I don't give up. And I think that's how I've been able to, I just think so many people, we think like, oh, I'm not special, so I can't achieve that, but you can. We're all unique.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's me. And that was probably the most long-winded answer that makes no sense, but
no, it does
a very
make
hard
sense.
question.
It is a hard question because I think as well, you're so career driven, you've built an incredible business, you know, and like you said, your work is so important to you. Yeah. And that's kind of become a part of like your self-worth and identity as well. I can relate to that. I really can. I'm like, if I didn't do the work I do or feel so passionate about it, who would Ruby be? What would I be doing in my life?
What's your answer to that question?
Oh, goodness, yeah. You're like, you've asked me.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think, honestly, I really liked what you said. I'm just a girl too. I'm a real person.
Yeah.
With a lot of different things. I'm not perfect. And I think too sometimes, especially when you're in like front-facing roles, I mean, I'm only new to sort of being in a front-facing role, but I think building my own identity off mic and on mic, that's something I'm coming to grapple with now too, you know, and being like, what do I want to put out in the world? What do I want to keep just for Ruby? It's the work we do as well. I don't know as well if that even makes sense, but it's something that I've considered a lot. Yeah, because you are being quite raw with yourself. And you've been so beautiful today. And you just have such a positive aura about you, Laura. You are probably one of the most down-to-earth, grounded people I've ever met.
That's very generous. Thank you.
No, thank you so
kind.
much for coming on the show. We do finish on one last question, and it's after talking about all the things you've inherited in your life so far, what do you intend on passing on?
Oh, I love this question. Oh, but it's very hard. I've thought a lot about it because I thought about it tangibly, but then I think when I come back to why I do what I do, and I'm very lucky with KIC, like I feel like I'm doing like what my life's work is in helping people feel like they are enough as they are. And as we've kind of touched on a little bit, we as women, we grew up in a society that profits like a shitload off telling us that we're not, like we take up too much space, like we need to be smaller, we need to talk less, all of these things that just try and shrink us. And also make us believe like unless we have the fanciest products, like we won't be enough. But for me, I think the thing that I would love to pass on with all the work that I do, and hopefully if it's maybe my legacy one day, who knows, but it would be to like for everyone listening and anyone that maybe like is that I'm able to touch with my work in whatever way that might be, is for them to know that like everyone listening, like you are enough as you are and you have everything inside of you right now. And I think we think that we need things outside of us to make us worthy, but you have got we have all got everything we need inside right now, and more things are not going to make us more worthy. It's like it's about ourselves and that trust and that relationship within. So I feel like if I could make any impact on anyone, that would kind of be the thing I'd love to pass on.
And I think you do every day in the work that you do through KIC and just being you. Thank you so much, Laura, for coming on the show. It's been a joy to chat to you.
Thank you.
You've been watching Inherited. And just a quick one, we are a new show, so if you want to help support us, make sure you click subscribe on YouTube and hit the like button right now as well. It's how we grow our audience, and it's really the best way for us to continue speaking to incredible guests. We'll be back with another episode next Tuesday. I'll see you then.